My father didn't even clear his throat before acting. He simply slid a sleek folder across the table and said my sister's name as though it were a guarantee. Lena had been home for only 7 days. I had carried the weight of my parents for 10 years. My mother's nod echoed the loudest in the room. I didn't argue. I didn't flinch. I set the power of attorney next to the house keys, the metal clinking sharply enough to pierce the quiet. Everyone assumed I was yielding. But when Lena unfolded the letter I'd left for her, she couldn't read it twice. She physically couldn't. I grew up in hallways scented with antiseptic and lavender, their lights buzzing quietly above. My father strode ahead, long and sure, greeting each resident by name. I used to follow behind, struggling with a wheelchair too large for me, standing on tiptoe just to keep it steady. The metal rattled, and he would glance back, offering a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Careful, Kara," he'd warn, then turn back to the person he intended to impress. Lena never lingered behind anyone. She glided, dresses flowing, curls catching the light, laughter pulling attention like gravity. My mother positioned her in doorways beside holiday displays, posting photos with captions about our bright future. I occasionally appeared in the background, cropped awkwardly, holding a clipboard, or mopping up a spill no one else noticed. Even as children, the disparity felt intentional. Lena received the dance shoes, summer camps, weekend trips meant to unlock her potential. I inherited responsibility. Kara's independent, my parents told everyone, as if independence were innate rather than forced. When Lena grumbled over homework, they hired a tutor. When I brought home straight A's, my father only nodded, eyes fixed on his laptop. "Expected from you." One birthday stands out. Lena's cake sparkled with candles, gold balloons floating, a crowd of relatives pressing in. Mine, 2 months later, was a store-bought sheet cake, half frosted, leaning precariously on the kitchen counter. My mother kissed my cheek, reminding me to grab my work uniform for the evening shift at the facility. I was 16. The shift wasn't optional. The mortgage was. I didn't resent Lena then. She hadn't written the rules. She merely thrived within them. But I learned early that desiring anything made me a burden. So I stopped wanting. I spent my days organizing medication drawers, folding towels, helping residents write holiday cards. I became the girl who fixed problems quietly, whose value made praise unnecessary. By the time I reached adulthood, this pattern was firmly set. Lena moved to the city to pursue a career in creative media, a dream my parents always spoke of with awe. When she called, it was usually for money, and they always sent it. Meanwhile, my father grew ill, then my mother. The business stumbled. Staff quit. Regulations tightened. And the person they relied on wasn't the daughter they'd adored. It was me. I signed the power of attorney at 2 a.m., perched on a vinyl hospital chair, my mother nodding as if this moment were inevitable. "You're good with serious matters," she murmured. It wasn't praise. It was confirmation of a role I never asked for. Some nights after long shifts, I'd catch my reflection in the facility's glass doors. Straight posture, hair tied back, tablet in hand. I didn't look like someone in her 20s. I looked like someone who had already lived a full life. Even then I realized this was my place. Not chosen but assigned. That's when I understood my family's belief. Lena was the face. I was the scaffolding. The shift happened quietly, the way a storm creeps in before anyone notices the sky has changed. First it was small things. An email chain I usually managed about state inspections arrived with no name attached. Then another about a staffing audit. Then a meeting on office succession planning. One I only learned about when a nurse asked why I wasn't presenting the operational report. I remember standing in the supply room, the cold hum of the refrigeration unit at my back, holding a box of wound dressings. My phone buzzed. A photo from my mother. Lena smiling in front of the facility sign, hair lifted by the wind. Caption: Future Leadership. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Another message followed. An invitation graphic for a family legacy celebration. Gold lettering, date, location. No mention of me, no consultation. Just a card in my mailbox, a formality. That evening, I walked into my parents' kitchen. The air smelled of roasted peppers. My father spoke softly to Lena about vision ideas for the next decade. My mother leaned against the island, nodding. I waited for acknowledgement. They didn't notice. When my father finally saw me, he offered a distracted smile. Kara, don't worry about administrative work right now. You've done enough heavy lifting. It's time for Lena to take on bigger responsibilities. The word bigger hung in the air. Lena stood there with arms crossed, a polite smile, as if preparing for a stage entrance rather than a role. I opened my mouth but no words came. My fingers clenched the edge of my tablet. My mother reached over, brushing my wrist lightly. You're good with behind-the-scenes work, she said. Let her shine. Behind the scenes. The phrase hit harder than anything else. Later that night, I found another folder on the dining table. Financial projections, written in Lena's handwriting. Numbers all wrong, proposals impossible. Yet my parents had signed their initials at the corner. The decision had already been made. I lowered myself into the chair, its legs whispering across the floor. My breathing evened out, shallow but steady. I glanced at the papers once more and felt something inside me settle instead of shattering. I just smiled. That night I didn't react. I didn't argue, correct the figures, or remind them who had sustained the system for 10 years. I simply closed the folder, returned it exactly where it had been, and walked upstairs. Each step felt deliberate, almost weightless, as if gravity no longer held me. In my room I perched on the edge of the bed. The walls were the same soft blue of my childhood. Faded, familiar and indifferent. I set my tablet beside me, letting its muted glow spill across my hands. The house was silent, save for Lena's laughter drifting up the staircase. Light, airy, as though she had already assumed her new role. I opened a blank document. No headings, no emotion, just an empty space. Then I began. The first entry was a timeline. 10 years condensed into bullet points. Medical emergencies, regulatory freezes, staffing crises, the year we nearly lost Medicaid support. Each disaster I had faced because no one else could navigate it. The second entry detailed structural licenses, compliance requirements, vendor contracts, hospital partnerships. I named every individual who relied on the system. Not the property itself. The inspectors who trusted my reports, the physicians who endorsed our care protocols, the caseworkers who reached me, not my parents when families panicked. I wasn't building a case. The case already existed. I simply organized it. By the next morning before dawn, I drove through Savannah, streets hushed under a pale gray sky. I parked outside Dr. Hale's office. He was already there, lights on, kettle steaming in the window. When he opened the door, he didn't ask why I had come. He just stepped aside. His office smelled of cedar and old books. A place where truth arrived quietly without fanfare. I set my notes on the table. He read in silence, glasses sliding down his nose, turning each page slowly, as if weighing their importance rather than reading words. When he finished, he leaned back. They're moving without you. And you're done asking to be seen. I nodded. Another nod. He tapped the edge of my timeline. You don't need revenge. You need structure. That afternoon he reached out to Ms. Rowan. She arrived carrying a leather portfolio and an air of calm that only comes from decades of navigating systems most people overlook. She went through everything I had prepared. Contracts, emails, compliance logs, my power of attorney documents. Her eyes scanning each page with practiced efficiency, lips tightening only when she reached the figures Lena had drafted. They're planning a transfer, she noted. But they don't grasp what they're actually transferring. Explain it, I urged. She started with the licenses. This is the backbone. Without it, the facilities are just buildings. Nothing more. Then she pointed to the compliance protocols I had drafted. This is intellectual property. You built it. Finally, she raised the summary of our partnerships. This is institutional capital. It follows the system, not a name. I sat quietly, absorbing each word. You can protect your work, she continued. Not through emotion but through boundaries. Over the next week, we constructed a legal framework. A nonprofit foundation designed to hold everything intangible. The brand, protocols, data systems, and partnerships. Not for ownership but for protection. A structure serving those in our care, not a family image. I named it Harbor Bridge Foundation quietly, imagining a bridge built for those who needed stability. Under my authority as power of attorney. Still valid, never rescinded. I carried out each transfer with the precision of someone measuring medication doses. Every document signed, notarized, and filed. My parents, thinking this was routine administrative housekeeping for health and business stability, accepted honorary advisory roles without reading the fine print. No ownership, no control, only recognition for their names. Once the work was complete, I returned to daily operations as if nothing had shifted. I moved through the hallways, checked logs, and adjusted schedules. Staff greeted me with the quiet respect of those who remembered who had kept them afloat. Meanwhile, Lena wandered from room to room with her notebook and gentle smile, suggesting color palettes for the website. My parents beamed at every word she spoke. The night before the legacy celebration, I sat alone in the small office behind the nurse station. Fluorescent lights hummed above. My tablet displayed one last document, a letter addressed to Lena. It wasn't angry. It wasn't accusatory. It was clear. I wrote about what she would inherit. A shell without the system, responsibility without preparation, a title without the foundation to support it. I shared the foundation's truth, not to shame her, but to ready her for the reality my parents refused to acknowledge. I ended with a single line that felt like stepping into light after years in shadow. What you carry next depends on what you choose to hold. I printed the letter, folded it with care, and slipped it into a red envelope, bold enough to be noticed without saying a word. On the day of the celebration, I tucked the envelope into my bag alongside the keys and the POA document. 3 items, 3 undeniable truths. This time I wasn't here to mend what they'd shattered. This time I would let the system speak for itself. From the doorway, the celebration appeared inviting. Soft lighting shimmered on crystal glasses, and linen napkins were folded like delicate little wishes. My parents stood at the head of the table, radiating a glow they hadn't shown in years. Lena sat between them, poised, her fingers lightly brushing the stem of her glass as though rehearsed for this exact moment. When my father tapped his spoon against a plate, the room hushed. His voice carried effortlessly. "Thank you all for being here tonight. We celebrate the future of our family's work." He turned to Lena, pride in the tilt of his chin. "She's ready to lead." My mother nodded, a gentle smile reserved for the moments she deemed historic. "She deserves it," she said. The words didn't hurt. They simply affirmed what I had already known. I waited for the applause to fade. Then I rose. Not with force, not abruptly, but enough to still shifting chairs and quiet murmurs. I placed the 3 items in front of me. The keys, the power of attorney, and the red envelope. The keys made the faintest metallic tap, slicing through the room's warmth. My father frowned. "Carrera, this isn't necessary." I slid them toward Lena. "It's all yours." Some guests smiled, mistaking it for a gracious gesture. Others exchanged wary glances, sensing a disquiet in the air. Lena reached for the envelope first, her fingers tracing its edges before slipping inside to unfold the letter. Her eyes scanned the opening lines, then sharpened with comprehension. Page by page, her expression hardened. Her breath hitched. "What is this?" she whispered. No one spoke. She read on, her grip tightening, knuckles pale. "No, this can't be right." Her voice grew sharp with disbelief. "You're joking." Her chair screeched as she rose, the room jolting with her movement. My father snatched the papers from her hands, his face paling as he reached the section detailing transfers, brand protocols, operational rights, and licensing agreements. All under the Harbor Bridge Foundation. His fingers shook. "Kara, what did you do?" I didn't answer. My mother grabbed a page, scanning it in short, frantic bursts. This says we don't own any of this. The facilities are just buildings," I said softly. "Nothing more." A heavy silence fell. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. In the far corner, Mr. Hayes, Harbor Bridge's attorney, rose from his chair. He had remained invisible until his presence was suddenly required. His voice remained steady, almost courteous. "Everything in this packet is correct. The transfers took place 3 years ago, at a time when Miss Kara Hart had full legal authority to act on her parents' behalf." My father's voice faltered. "Without our consent?" Hayes replied gently. "With your signatures, you both approved these documents at the time. We have medical verification and third-party oversight confirming the necessity." Lena's gaze darted between him and me, eyes wide, her breath uneven. So what exactly did they just give me? Hayes folded his hands calmly. 2 aging properties, along with the debt attached to them. Anything beyond that requires certification from Harbor Bridge. And certification depends on meeting the care standards Ms. Hart established. My mother shook her head. She can meet them. She can learn. Hayes lifted a single page. If staffing ratios drop, safety protocols slip, or any core process deviates even slightly, Harbor can revoke the license within 60 days. Without that license, the buildings cannot operate. My father's voice sank to a whisper. So we have nothing. I didn't correct him. They had exactly what they valued most. Appearance without substance. Lena slumped back in her chair, the letter limp in her hands, the confident posture she'd maintained all evening dissolving, shoulders folding inward. I thought I was taking over something real. I finally spoke. You were. The system, the responsibility, the work. You just never recognized it. Hayes closed the folder. This arrangement safeguards the seniors, protects the staff. It isn't punitive. It's structural. My parents stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as the daughter who'd carried them, but as the person who no longer would. I offered no comfort. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stepped back from the table, leaving the room's silence behind me. The system would speak from here. That night I didn't sleep. Not from guilt, because there was nothing to feel guilty about, but because the house felt strangely quiet without the weight of expectation pressing against the walls. My phone remained dark on the nightstand. No alerts from staff. No late-night calls about medication errors. No reminders about inspections. The silence felt foreign, like entering a room I hadn't realized existed. By morning, the consequences were already unfolding. I observed from a distance. Not out of avoidance, but because I no longer belonged within their orbit. Bank emails, staff resignations, compliance notices. None of it reached me. It all landed exactly where responsibility had been placed. Still, I drove to the new Harbor Bridge Center before sunrise. The windows glowed a soft amber, reflecting the first light over the river. Inside, volunteers prepared morning activities, voices calm and steady. Someone tuned a piano in the recreation room. The notes floated down the hallway like a quiet reminder that life continues, even when families don't. I entered my office. Small, plain, but softened by the morning light. The desk edges, muted wall colors, the stack of folders I'd left the night before. I set down my keys and exhaled slowly, letting the breath fall into the room like a final weight released. Later that week, I saw my parents in a Medicaid waiting room. Sitting together, hands clasped, staring straight ahead. They didn't notice me pass. I didn't pause. Not from anger, but because there was nothing left to fix. A month later, during a site visit, I spotted Lena in one of the Allied facilities, pushing a resident's wheelchair. Her movements were careful, small. Without the spotlight, she looked different. She didn't see me, and I let her have that moment. Some stories end in triumph. Mine ended in space. Clean, quiet, earned. For the first time, I carried nothing that wasn't mine. In the end, nothing dramatic occurred. No shouting. No slammed doors. No final reckoning. Just a clean line drawn in silence. Families fracture loudly. Boundaries settle like dust. Soft, inevitable, impossible to sweep away once you stop pretending you're the one holding everything together. Freedom didn't come from winning. It came from stepping aside without looking back. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. And sometimes the silence that follows is the only truth that ever matters. If this story stayed with you, stay close. More are coming.